everybody thinks that doing this sound equipment and all this live streaming stuff I do, that it's just, you just learn about it. It's just extraneous trial and error. Anybody can do it. You just keep trying stuff until something works. And then you go with that, and you memorize that. And if anybody touches it, you get very upset about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've tried that with the computer. It still don't work for me. All I do is just cut it off, die, and can't hardly get it back on.
Well, sometimes it's a bigger sometimes it's just a bigger headache than it needs to be. But you know, as long as we're reaching somebody, it's worth the pain and the put on, I guess. All right. So last week we talked about the out of context. We did part 2, and we're going to shift away from that because I said that it might happen just that way, and we may go back to it. I haven't officially decided yet, but I think I found something that's going to keep us occupied at least for the rest of the year, and maybe the rest of next year too. Depends on how long we keep our boots planted. But I've never myself, and I have read a fair bit of them, but I've never myself done a study all the way through the book of Psalms. And never in this classroom. I think we've been in and out of the Psalms at times, but and there's two gentlemen here that I know have both preached and taught out of the book of Psalms, but to go from 1 to 150 is an undertaking, especially when you get 119 is its own level of undertaking. It is a very long book. It is a very it's a book that, though you have to remember when you read the Psalms that you're basically reading the hymnal of the Jewish people. You're reading it's inspired. I'd say it's a little bit higher up on the rungs than our hymnal as far as inspirational goes. But you're reading. Songs come from, when you're writing music, when you're looking at music, songs come from a place of emotion. Songs come from events that are happening in your life. They shape the music. They shape the words you're speaking. And a lot of these are just prayers and there's. When I was looking up information for this stuff online for this class, I did find a place that had a pretty good breakdown of the entirety of the book. The first chapter through the 41st chapter are mostly Psalms of David. Now, that's not all of them, and when we throw these things into these categories, there's always caveats. They're mostly Psalms of David, his life, his faith, his prayers to God, some dark moments, some happier moments, some brighter moments, and the first 2 chapters being introductions to the book, and that's actually what we're going to look at today. Then chapters 42 through 72 are more historical psalms. They're prayers of lamentation and distress, and have a lot of historical facts about Israel in those 30 some odd psalms. And then 73 through 89 are a darker and bleaker set of psalms. They're pretty sad, actually, with rays of hope throughout. And then you have the pre-captivity, basically a collection of pre-captivity songs that run from 90 to 106. Talks about the long-standing faithfulness of God. Moses' psalm that he wrote is in that chapter. So these are, and when I say pre-captivity, that's pre-Babylonian and Assyrian captivity. And then you have post-captivity and return psalms that are from 107 to 150, and they're the final declarations of the goodness of God, and ending with 5 psalms that are just hallelujahs generally. And I don't know if we're going to get to all of it. We may only get through one section. We may only get through this class. We may all be gone before next week. But we are going to. My hope is to look at all of these as far as we can. Yes, Sister Jonna.
107 to 150 is that what?
Those are psalms that are written either in captivity or post their return. And are generally about the long-standing faith and goodness of God, and then it ends. Those last 5 psalms are a lot of hallelujahs. So Psalms chapter 1, verse 1. I don't think we're going to read or teach about anything that is unfamiliar to anybody here, but an introduction is always important. Finding out what we're talking about, what the theme of a book is about, where we're going from here can be largely found in these 2 chapters. So, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. The opening 2 verses of this chapter posit a fairly simple idea, but one that I think that is easy for us to fall away from, and that is the man of God, the person of God, the one that wants to be blessed. It does say blessed is the man, but in saying blessed is the man, there is a question that way. If you do this, you will be blessed. There's an inference to be made there. That walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, i.e., you don't take advice from lost people. Nor standeth in the way of the sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. You're not finding your place among the ungodly. You're not finding your seat. And then it goes on and says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And delight is not a word that is used very often in the Scriptures. But this specific place, I looked it up, and I forget the Hebrew word there. It is Hebrew. But it can mean the most valuable thing to you. So not only do we have to find ourselves, if we want to be blessed, I think a lot of religions sell blessing as an offer. If you join this religion, if you join our group, you will get these things in return. I think all of us, nobody wants to be cursed. You would have to be very, very far from God indeed to want to be cursed. But we have an opportunity for blessing. But not only do we have to not follow after the way of the world. I mean, that's essentially what verse 1 is stating. But we also have to be active. It's not enough to just simply be set apart. And I think that's where the fall down of a lot of people's doctrine of separation ideas go. It's not enough to just be different. It's not enough to be separate. We have to be actively seeking, and it says, and his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. So not only to be blessed do you have to set yourself apart, but you have to be active and meditative in what God has to say, in what God wants you, to do. This is a constant. This is a constant dwelling upon the things of God. And not only does it need to be a constant, because you can sit and you can constantly dwell on the Scriptures and be just angry as a cat that's had its tail stepped on. But it's your delight. It is the candy at the end of the day, and the beginning of the day, and throughout the day. Apparently, I always, for whatever reason, Werther's Original candy always sticks around in my mouth longer than I think it does most people. I can have a Werther's in my mouth for what seems like an hour before it finally goes away. And maybe I don't have enough spit in my mouth to dissolve it. But Werther's Original is something that hangs around. That's how it's supposed to be. They're tasty, but we want the everlasting gobstopper. We were talking about Willy Wonka during the break. It's supposed to be something that's sweet, but something that hangs around with us, that sticks with us, that we delight in, that we're happy about. When we find ourselves in the Scriptures, in the meditate, we should be. It shouldn't be a burden on us. We should be happy to be. And if you're not, that some people would say, well, that automatically means that you need to examine your salvation. I think that there's a place for a Christian. I think this verse offers a place that a Christian can dwell that is separate from the world, but not happy in the law of God. Honestly, I think the Pharisees spent a lot of their time there. They were following after the law of God, but they weren't happy to be in it. In fact, the misery of fasting and things like that is what they craved, because they wanted to see people miserable because they were doing it for the wrong reasons. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Now, verse 3 is the blessing. It's easy to run over it. It says, blessed is the man, and then just start reading through the verse. All these verses are linked up together. If we can separate ourselves, if we can not follow after sinful ways, ungodly ways, if we can find delight in the law of the Lord, what is the blessing? And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. Now, this is these words are often are used in that song, "I Shall Not Be Moved." I've seen trees by rivers before, and rivers can take trees away. But what is getting across from this is not necessarily that you're not going to ever face adversity. A tree planted by the water has one resource that trees need and desire above all other things, and what is that? Water. So if we find ourselves in the law of God and we meditate in it and we delight in it, the resource that we need to grow as Christians is going to flow right underneath our roots. We're going to be able to drink, and that doesn't mean that adversity is not going to come. And I think God sometimes sends us adversity. You know what? Creeks rise, waters rise, and they beat on trees, and some trees fall. At the end of the day, though, that is the lifeblood of a tree. Between that and the sunshine, it's what they live off of. And it goes on and says, and his leaf shall not wither. That means you're not going to die. That means that you're not going to lose your fullness. You're not going to have, around here, actually usually about this time of year, we've had an incredibly wet summer here in Tennessee. But around here, generally around this time of year, this is when everything starts drying up. And we don't get the usual, like I think New England gets a color change around October and stuff with the trees, where the leaves change color. Ours doesn't happen naturally that way because they get plenty of water up there. Our color change comes because the trees are so dry they can't support the leaves anymore. They wither and they fall off and they die. And it kind of usually brings an early onset fall. I remember one summer, we had a summer that was in the early part of it that was so dry it actually killed the leaves. Remember, we had an early color change. And that's what this is talking about here. Not only are you going to have the resource to keep yourself alive, that withering time, the time when adversity comes on you, it's not going to cause you to wither. And then the final thing is, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Now, this is, I think, an opportunity. We oftentimes don't reward ourselves with a lot of, and I don't think we should. Our work is not for here. Our work is for above. But we just simply need to look at the life of Joseph and how he dwelt as a man. It says, whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. That's both in a spiritual capacity. I think that we can have great prosperity in a spiritual capacity, especially when we're finding ourselves meditating on this day and night. But I think this can offer for a physical capacity as well. You know, Joseph was very dedicated to God. He did everything that he could to follow the law of God as he knew it in that time. The law hadn't been written, but the man served God in such a way that everything that he laid his hand on sprouted. If he planted a bean, it was the tallest beanstalk. When he was working in the prison, the prisoners never were so well behaved. When he was vizier over Egypt, grain poured in like a river of water. Everything that he did was caused to prosper. And I think this verse is actually kind of specifically calling back to that idea. If we set our eyes on things above, it can be that when we do things on things below, things are going to go well for us. God has said throughout the Scriptures, and He proves it in a lot of the examples that are given us from the children of Israel, that He provides all the needs of His people. We never should have want of anything. God knows our needs above. The ungodly are not so. Now we start a new topical sentence in verse 4 that goes against everything that is mentioned in verses 2 and 3. The ungodly are not so. That means they are not like that tree planted by the water, but are like chaff, which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the day of judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Now, I don't think that this has to just be unsaved. You can be ungodly and also be saved. I'll be the first to admit there are many, many days that I go in that direction because I still have human flesh to deal with. I think what he's trying to get across here, and you could go saved and lost here. It's a very easy analogy to make, but the chaff is what draw my mind. You remember in the New Testament, it talks about our works that are whether they're wood or hay or stubble or gold. I think that this has got a lot of the same links there. It doesn't mean that all of the works that we do are worth nothing, but the ungodly's work, it's not worth anything. And when it comes right down to it, when it comes right down to judgment time, all that stuff's going to get burned away with fire, and only the actual things that are done for Christ are going to stand. And unfortunately, I think a lot of time we stand with maybe a few handfuls of nuggets of gold, where others, where giants of the faith, stand with towering piles, because we either don't find ourselves separated, or we find ourselves separated and not delighting in the law of God, or somewhere in between. We're not where we're going to be. And he said, "For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous." Verse 6 leaves very little doubt on who is performing this judgment. He knows who's doing what's what. He is fully aware of your actions, of my actions, and the place in which we often find ourselves. But the way of the ungodly shall perish. There's no gain there. There's no gain there. And then we roll into, I want to do chapter 2 as well. And we roll into chapter 2. Why doth the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder, and cast their cords away from us. Now, you can almost link these two things because it starts talking about what the way of the world is like. Verse 1 posits a question: why do the heathen rage, and why do the people imagine a vain thing? It's referencing what they end up saying in verse 3, which is let's break down God's people. Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. The bands, and I don't know if that is a band like a band of soldiers, or a band like a physical band like a rubber band, or a band of steel or something like that. But the cords, I did look the Hebrew up on that there, and it can mean a bough, like a branch. It can also mean like literally a rope. But I think the fact of the matter stands, and it is in this that the world does not hold your best interest at heart. The world does not want you to succeed. It is their goal, a vain goal nonetheless, as we're fixing to see in the coming verses, a vain goal nonetheless, but it is a goal that they hold very dear to themselves, a goal that they very much desire to achieve. And it's not just the layperson. It says the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together. There are a lot of people, I think, and election time in the United States, if you're not in the United States, is a very tumultuous time in this country, I think for all sides included, because we feel like that our Americans, especially, I think, feel like that they have some level of control or say-so in their government. I don't really think that is an existent thing anymore. They've proven they can fake voting results. I mean, I'm not saying don't go vote, but I'm saying that maybe your opinion doesn't matter quite as much as you think it does. The things are going to play out. The way that things are going to play out. God is going to have the Pharaoh on the throne that he so desires. And people work themselves up in such a tizzy. I do want to, before I finish this thought, I do want to read verse 4. And he that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. We work ourselves up so much about, and it's Nancy Pelosi's wanting to take all your Bibles and all your guns away, and the earth is falling, and you better stockpile your Bibles because they're fixing to be a non-thing. You know what? I don't see that happen, because I have a God in heaven that sits on his throne and not only doesn't like what's going on, openly laughs at the idea of us being cast away from them, of his people being not the rock that they're founded on. You remember, we're supposed to be built on a rock. We're not on the shifting sands that they dwell on. We don't operate on the same power level as the world. We have such a... And yes, they have the devil backing them, and the devil is a very active and strong creature. But oh, the power that we fight alongside of, that we fight in representation of. We don't need to worry about these things. You know what? If Biden, if Trump, if a monkey makes its way into office, and honestly, it feels like over the last couple of years, that's what we've got, is monkeys. Just people hollering and screaming and throwing feces all over the place and everything. Our government is a zoo. It doesn't matter who's up there, because we're supposed to be delighting in this and meditating in this day and night. It doesn't matter. Also, because we have a God that takes care of all of it. You know, the Pharaoh that rose up that knew not Joseph, it's a pretty bad time for the children of Israel. You know what? It wasn't many, many years later, about 80, 90 years later, Moses showed up on the scene, and he gave them a very, very hard lesson in the power of God, in how how powerful he can be. Now, did they not have to go through some hard times? I'm not saying that we're not looking at hard times. I'm saying that our worry, our constant hand wringing and fret taking is a waste of your time. Your political and do whatever you want, but the political Facebook posts and yelling and screaming, and I get it at the barbershop all the time, yelling and screaming about politics in public places and all, they don't do any good. You know what does do good? This right here, communicating with the man who holds it all in his hand, like this right here, that can flick it away at a whim, that created it with his spoken word. We don't need to worry about all that other stuff. And I think because we are allowed to have some kind of say-so in it, we allow ourselves to fret over, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? It doesn't matter what it's going to be, because at the end of the day, my God, the actual King, is still reigning. Let's continue. Verse 5, then he shall speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet I have set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the utmost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, and thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now we go into some of these verses here. Not only is he going to, he says, speak them. Verse 5 says he'd speak to them in his wrath and vex them with the shortest pressure. Their time is coming. You know what? Pharaoh's time showed up. Not only did he lose the economic and physical strength of his entire country, but he lost his son too. Everyone died. He lost his own life at the end. And I have set my king upon my holy hill Zion. I think from verses 6 to 9, these ring very, very, very reminiscent of Jesus' actual second return. Not our rapture, not our catching away, but of him setting his foot down and crushing the armies of the earth. And coming back, because it says he would in verse 9, thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Revelations references Jesus ruling with a rod of iron. In verse 7, it talks about, thou art my, capital S in my Bible, son. This day have I begotten thee, the only begotten Son of God. I think verses 6 through 9, and you could even say 5 maybe is talking about tribulation. Bring very, very reminiscent of verses that you can read in the book of Revelation. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth, serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. Now he ends this discord about outside pressure and says they should be warned. And I think that is our job. They should be warned to bow humbly and fearfully. Even if, the lost don't have to believe in him to fear him. I was talking to a guy at the barbershop this last week about, and we were talking about how the school system has gotten so rough and it's not as. And I said, I think the morality in this country really descended when we started pulling God out of the public school system. Because even an atheist, in the time when prayer was still allowed in the school system, at least had a respect for those people. And there's no respect anymore. There's no fear. Respect is born of fear. Fear of the Lord is beginning. I think Proverbs says in its first chapter, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge. And this verse is saying for all these people out here that don't fear, you need to come and fearfully bow. You don't even have to believe in him. You don't have to be saved, but you do need to fear him. It said, kiss the Son, lest he be angry. Adulation. Perish from the way. And in the last verse, I think this wraps up and actually puts us in a fairly good places. Blessed are they that put their trust or your faith in him. We have a very, very unique place that we can perceive all things from, and we take it for granted so much of the time. We are in a very, very, very privileged, but we're even in a more privileged position than David was at the time of the writing of this. Trusting God also went along with a lot of sacrifices and the need for law keeping. I mean, look at Brother Junior's lesson this morning. What price did David have to pay for his sin? David repented himself to the Lord, but that was not enough. What was enough? It had to be blood. It had to be a price paid. Somebody had to pay a price. And that is the story of the law. How much better are we that when we can say, when we put our trust in him, that means that we've believed in faith, and the rest of it's took care of. Now, does that excuse us from what we looked at the very beginning of the first chapter? I don't think it excuses us from not living in a correct manner, from not trying to follow Him. But for all intents and purposes, your debt is paid. And what a privileged position we gain from that, but it also places us in a position of responsibility. And I think Christians, by and large, especially here in this country, we shed our responsibility. That will be somebody else's job. I'm busy. Whatever I've got going on is more important. That's somebody else's job. All right. Are there any questions about Psalms 1 or 2? I know it's probably fairly simple stuff that you've read 119 times, but hopefully we've gained some learning or some understanding from it. If there's not anything else, I guess we will be dismissed. Y'all have a good rest of the week. Thank you.